Now I think many of you wonder whether the guy is half idiot or completely stupid, and you are not far from the truth.
The strange use of the hand cannon you see in my hand was inspired by a well-known depiction of a knight using a firearm. It is probably the first ever depiction of mounted use of a gun that was created by Taccola or Mariano di Jacopo in the beginning of the 15th century. That's what we are after today.
Bombardella, sclopum, handkulverin, bombardet, faustrohr, handgonne. Well, they are all the same. It is a handgun. It's a small artillery piece. And this is why Taccola called it bombardella, because it was the smaller version of the heavy artillery bombards. So this is a short barrel but large caliber handgun that usually had a smaller diameter chamber in the breech. Now, this one is made of iron. It was made from a red hot sheet, an iron sheet that was forged around a mandrel. It was welded together, and then later it was reinforced with these iron bands. Now, a specialty of this handgun is that its handle is also made of iron, and it also has an eye at the end with this rope, which means it was intended for cavalry use.
Very similar hand cannons can be found in many early firearms collections all around Europe, like this one from the Firearms Museum of Paris, dated to the end of the 14th century.
So this piece is not an exact repro, but it is made completely in the spirit of the originals from the late 14th century, early 15th century. This is made in Italy by LT Customs, maker of fine early firearms. It has a 20mm smooth bore, so it is quite a good reproduction. We are in the caliber range where we have to be. And we are going to learn its importance today. But before we go on, please subscribe to the channel. If you have anything to say, then please put it in the comment section. If you want to receive more from Capandball, you want exclusive content, then please come to patreon.com/Capandball. This is the place to support me, and this is the place to find more exclusive content from me time by time.
Tacola not only created the image of the knight using a firearm, but also shared many important information about the specialties of this use. He did not specify the powder charge, but he did point out that a wooden plug over the powder will increase the force of the shot, and the projectile was made from lead. But if lead was not available, small stones could also be fired from the gun. The powder could be meal powder, or from the middle of the 15th century, granulated black powder. Recreation of the ballistics is nearly impossible, so I just used what I thought was right: 70 grains of 1F Swiss powder, a wooden plug over the powder, and a 19mm lead round ball, and some paper to keep the projectile in place. When using meal powder for priming, slight compression of the charge in the touch hole resulted in a delayed ignition that offered time for the handgunner to put the handle on top of the shoulder and aim better. In case of the cavalry used by Tacola, the gun is held against the armored chest, without the chance to properly aim with the upper plane of the bore. Although I'm not wearing a breastplate, the recoil was not bad at all.
Now, of course, my horse is not moving, but this is convincing. We have a belly shot here, or shot in the center of the chest, which means that from 10 meters it was quite accurate. And we have a second hit here, which is the wooden plug. It's good. It's good. I love it. Interesting stuff indeed. But who was Taccola? So his original name is Mariano di Jacopo. He was born in Siena in 1382 and died in 1453.
Siena was one of the main centers for the best master craftsmen of hand cannons and casters. The Sienese Republic had attracted a large number of foreign master bombardiers in the 14th and 15th century, who joined the local masters and blacksmiths. They played a key role in developing the methods for making firearms. Firearms, both artillery and handguns, became a symbol of military power in the city. This was definitely an inspiring environment for Tacola.
He was a very well-known humanist of that time, a Renaissance man. He was an engineer and also an artist. He wrote two very important manuscripts that were inspired by earlier works and that inspired the military thinkers of the later ages as well. So the first book is titled De Ingeneis, about engines. It's a beautiful collection of his graphical ideas from 1419 to 1433. It's a really an interesting piece. Now, the second book, De Machinis, about the machines, is a, let's say, refined and supplemented version of his first book. Both are beautiful collections of engineering inventions, but probably some of the ideas are weird. At least they look weird, and probably many of them did not work at all. But in case of some, well, they were kind of foreseeing the future, and some were even feasible by the end of the 15th century.
Good kick.
And this is the second shot. Well, not in the guide, but in the target, which makes me happy. From 10 meters, well, that's okay. That's okay for me. Let's talk about the images in question. So Tacola displayed a knight using a firearm in both of his works, but there are minor differences between the two images. The one in De Machinis clearly shows a more advanced armor. I think that the time frame between the two images can be something like 30 to 40 years. Probably, yeah, that would be right.
This is the image from the Ingenes, with lots of interesting details I'll talk about later. Interestingly, the horse has a long spike attached to the head, probably replacement for the spear that the knight had to leave to be able to handle the gun. The image shows all the implements needed to manage the firearm: the slow match, the saddlebags, the ramming tool, the fork secured to the saddle, and the protection of the horse. The image from De Machinis is modernized indeed, probably based on practical experiences. First of all, the handgunner here fired multiple projectiles. Second, the horse lost his spike, so probably Tacola understood that this kind of use of mounted shooter cannot be merged into the traditional heavy cavalry role of the age. The tools for managing the gun remain the same.
So let's understand what we see in these pictures. So there is a bombardella in the hand of the knight, which is a heavy knight, which is already quite strange because usually we associate using ranged weapons with light cavalry, not with heavy cavalry. So this is already interesting. Now the handgunner is held in the left hand. It is supported by a hook that is attached to the saddle. There is a rope around the neck of the soldier, and the butt, or I don't know, this ring is supported against the chest. So this is the hold of the gun. Now, this is the very earliest depiction of a bandolier, ladies and gentlemen. Otherwise, it can be quite uncomfortable holding this gun while riding. But anyway, Tacola knew what he is writing about and drawing about, I guess. So the left hand is supporting the gun, while the right hand is holding the slow match to ignite the powder through the touch hole. Now, the powder and the balls, according to the description below the picture, are placed in the saddlebag just behind the soldier.
The saddlebag on the first image is mounted on the horse, while on the image from De Machinis we have a separate drawing of it to fully understand its construction.
Now our heavy knight is also equipped with a very special item that we seldom see on firearm-done soldiers, which looks like a pickaxe, a small pickaxe. Now this pickaxe was not a fighting tool, it was actually replacing a ramrod, so it had to be long enough to push the ved and to hammer the ved into the breech of the barrel. Now this ved, this wooden plug, was intended for choking the powder. Third shot, ladies and gentlemen, and it's on target. Happy Capandball. Now, according to the description in De Machinis, the role of this soldier was to ride close to the enemy and weaken their first ranks with gunfire, and then probably continue with the hand-to-hand combat. Now, both the bullets, both the loud noise could be destructive to the enemy. Tacola knows that it is very, very important to train your own horses to withstand the large noise of the gun, the large bang of the gun, and also it was important to protect the horse with padding, with closes, so you don't actually burn it with the muzzle flash or accidentally with your slow match.
That kind of protective padding or armor is visible on both images.
Now Tacola was quite serious about using the firearms by the heavy cavalry. He also displayed in both of his works a one-man tank, which was special mount integrated into the saddle for handgunners, even for multiplied handgunners. It's quite interesting. But it is a good question whether this had any kind of tactical value or not. Well, we know that light cavalry used bows, crossbows, javelins for ages. But we seldom associate heavy cavalry with any kind of ranged weapons. Definitely not with firearms. We know that the quick spread of the mechanical ignition, the wheel lock, the flintlock, the snapping matchlock, that revolutionized the way the people were using the firearms. And this affected the cavalry arm as well. In the second half of the 16th century, the firearm spread among the cavalry as well. So by the end of the century, it was impossible to think about any kind of cavalryman without at least a pistol. So it did change, but this idea predates that time. And it is quite interesting because you could say that this is just some kind of a wild brainstorm after a good night with Italian wines, but not. The idea is there, but the gun is not really practical for that use. The skirmishing role with ranged weapons of the light cavalry is well documented in the age. But to tell you the truth, I have not found any account in the 14th century or 15th century, rather 15th century, when heavy cavalry was using handgunners. So if you found one, then please add it in the description. But Tacola was not completely wrong when giving firearms to the heavy cavalry. Think about the lanciers, think about the cuirassiers. Well, in the end of the 16th century, beginning of the 17th century, they all have firearms. They all at least have a pair of pistols, which justifies that idea. But in the 15th century, when the heavy cavalry's main role is to rush the enemy with cold weapon and break through their line, well, that time, a heavy cavalryman stopping for shooting his gun and then changing to his sword, well, does not seem too practical to me. So I think that this was rather an idea that was later justified by the development of the firearms. With the development of the mechanical ignition systems, finally at the beginning of the 16th century, the firearms became suitable for the cavalry. So that's the end of the show. Well, all the hits are in the target, which means that it is usable from this distance, from a standing position, not from the horseback, which is riding with a high speed or even galloping. But anyway, the idea works. It is complicated, which means that I completely understand why the firearms were not used on horseback until there were several lock systems that you could utilize. So which means that you still have to wait another, let's say, 80 years to make this idea effective. But it was a good idea. You may have realized that the gun on the depiction has a hook. So it's a Hakenbüchse, if I want to be completely correct. Now, mine does not have it. Usually we say that the hook is for reducing the recoil of the gun. But we always forget that these early guns, well, they were short-barreled guns, large caliber guns, which means that even if you fill this bore entire with powder and just put a ball on top, it will still not have too much recoil. And this is justified by my standing hold as well, where I was supporting the gun with the muscles, or at least the place of the muscles on my belly. It did not have any kind of serious recoil, which means that this hook is, I think, rather for supporting the gun, for a stable hold, and not for reducing the recoil. But that's my assumption only.
The best way to try recoil is holding it simply against my belly.
Good massage. Let's not also forget that the handle of the gun was supported by the chest, where you have the cuirass and where you have the gambesson. And I'm 100% sure that that soldier firing that gun in that position with the armor plates behind the handle did not feel anything about the recoil at all. We also have another very interesting early depiction of knights using firearms. It is from a manuscript that can be found in the Bavarian State Library today. This is CGM 734, that's the code of the manuscript. And the title is Feuerwerks- und Büchsenmeistersbuch. It was written sometimes at the end of the 15th century. It can be quite properly dated because it also shows some snapping matchlock mechanisms which appeared in the last quarter of the 15th century. Now, this image shows two knights in close combat. Both of them are wearing a full armor, and one is using a Faustrohr, a short, well, pistol-like firearm. It is discharged on the enemy. We don't actually see any kind of lock system, but it is used single-handedly, which means that probably it must have some kind of lock. Probably it can be something like this wheel-lock pistol. This is probably the earliest wheel-lock pistol, the repro of the earliest wheel-lock pistol that is now held in the Royal Armories. The original of this pistol is dated to 1520, 1530, so probably this could be the time when the firearm is appearing in the hands of the cavalryman that is really working. So this kind of firearm, the wheel-lock pistol, allowed the rider to shoot immediately as he wanted. You don't have to manage the match, you just have to pull the trigger to make it work. And this is much closer to where the relation of the knights and the firearms evolved in the later ages. Finally, of course, firearms did conquer the armor, but it was a very long time. Just imagine that at the end of the 19th century, cuirassiers were still wearing their armor, and they abandoned their breastplates just before the First World War. And when you're done with your single shot, you know what? You have a beautiful mace here. So ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that you liked this little time travel again. If you like what I do, then please subscribe, like, share, comment. Please visit us on patreon.com/Capandball for exclusive content. And until next time, stay cool and keep your powder dry.